Holly, as people come in, if you could also you can allow their microphone and their camera. So if you could do that for folks as they come in, that would be great.
Yeah, totally.
Thanks.
And I just started recording, just so you know.
Perfect, thank you.
Good morning, Kirsten.
Hello, welcome. Thanks everyone for joining. We'll wait a couple more minutes as a couple more people trickle in, and then I'll get started.
Very good. Thank you very much for hosting this.
You bet.
I think, Kirsten, people may not realize that they have to enable the voice and the video.
Yes, I think Polly and I have to do that for folks. So we're doing that as people come in.
Thank you.
Yes. All right, or a couple other folks are joining, so we'll just give them a minute or two. Thanks everyone for joining. Okay, I think we'll get started here. We are recording this presentation, so folks just be aware of that, and we'll be posting it on our website following this webinar for future reference. Thanks folks for joining us. This is the informational webinar about the 2023 New Hampshire Coastal Resilience Grants funding opportunity. I'm Kirsten Howard. I'm the Resilience Program Coordinator for the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services Coastal Program. And my colleague, Polly Crocker, is here with us as well. She will be helping us run this webinar today and assist with the grant program as well as we progress. I mentioned we're recording the presentation. I'll ask folks to also have themselves on mute as I present, just so that we don't hear feedback noise. And as I talk through the key highlights of the New Hampshire Coastal Resilience Grant funding opportunity, please add questions to the chat. Polly's going to moderate your chat questions. And then at the end, we'll have a little bit of time for discussion as well. So let's get started here. I'll start with just a short introduction of the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services Coastal Program, and then we'll cover the highlights of the Coastal Resilience Grant funding opportunity, how you can apply for funding, how the applications are evaluated, and then, as I mentioned, we'll end with questions and discussion. So the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services, or DES Coastal Program, is funded by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration Office for Coastal Management under the Coastal Zone Management Act. We sit in the Water Division of DES, and our mission is to protect clean water, restore coastal habitats, and make communities more resilient to flooding and other natural hazards through funding and staff assistance to coastal towns and cities and other local and regional groups. We work primarily with the 17 tidally influenced communities in New Hampshire that make up our coastal zone, which is depicted here on this map. And the Coastal Resilience Grant Program has existed since 2014. It has shifted over time, funding different types of projects throughout those coastal zone communities. Over the course of that time, it's funded 23 projects totaling just under $1 million in federal grant funding that we pass through from NOAA, and has also been able to capitalize or mobilize about $475,000 in non-federal match resources from grantees. So all of the past CRG, Coastal Resilience Grant, I'm going to call it CRG from here on out. All of those past projects that we've funded are summarized on the CRG website. And those summaries include links to the approved contracts and scopes for those projects in case you're interested in digging a little deeper. Some examples, just to give you an idea of past projects that the CRG funding opportunity has funded, include an effort in 2018 to design the tidal road crossing at Leberlin Creek and Newmarket to improve aquatic organism passage and salt marsh migration and to reduce flooding on Bay Road. Creation of a restoration plan for the Philbrook Pond salt marsh in Northampton. An effort to review Dover's existing climate plans to better integrate and improve equity and racial justice, and an ongoing project to evaluate basement flooding at the Black Heritage Trail headquarters in Portsmouth to understand connections to potential groundwater rise as a result of sea level rise and identify some options for mitigating that flooding. So just a smattering of examples just to give you some ideas there. So now focus on important things you need to know as you consider project ideas and prepare applications for the 2023 CRG. All of this information can also be accessed via our website. I've included a simplified link here on this slide, and we can also include the link in the chat for you to access. For the purposes of the CRG funding opportunity, this is our working definition of coastal resilience. So we define coastal resilience as the capacity of a coastal community or a coastal system to adapt in a changing climate, measured by the capacity to bounce back quickly from shocks and stresses like storms, and leap forward by fostering sustained and equitable achievement of community goals and ensuring the social, economic, environmental, and cultural well-being of all peoples and habitats over the long term. The purpose of the CRG program itself is to support projects that build capacity, advance planning, and develop designs to increase coastal resilience, including community and/or habitat resilience in one or more of New Hampshire's coastal zone communities. Those coastal zone communities are listed here. So Dover, Durham, Exeter, Greenland, Hampton, Hampton Falls, Madbury, Newcastle, Newfields, Newington, Newmarket, Northampton, Portsmouth, Rollinsford, Rye, Seabrook, and Stratham. Eligible applicants for the CRG grants include coastal municipalities, quasi-governmental organizations, non-governmental organizations, academic institutions, and state agencies. Governments and organizations can be involved in more than one application, but can only submit one proposal or application as the lead applicant. And then applicants and projects based in and composed of communities that have historically received fewer funding opportunities for coastal resilience are strongly encouraged. And we are giving some preference to lead applicant organizations that have never received a CRG award in the past. Projects, I'll talk a little bit here about the eligible projects and the project categories we're funding. So across all projects, projects must show that they're minimizing negative impacts to environmental resources, and strong preference is going to be given to projects that avoid negative impacts to environmental and cultural resources. We're also across all projects providing preference for projects that build coalitions and protect and sustain cultural heritage, advance environmental justice, advance inclusive access to the coast, and/or protect and restore natural coastal resources. We're also across all projects providing preference to those that collaboratively develop products and outcomes, meaning that those projects integrate inclusive, ethical, and mutually beneficial engagement and decision-making structures. There's more information on that in section B of the application instructions. The link is in the bottom corner of the slide here. That includes some of the collaboratively developing products and outcomes also includes centering priorities of groups that have been historically included from municipal government and other decision-making spaces. So in particular, not limited to, but including Black communities, Indigenous communities, communities of color, speakers of language other than English, and people with disabilities. The 3 project categories being funded this time around include building capacity projects, planning projects, and design projects. And I'll just dig into the details of what we mean by those a little bit further here. All of this, again, can be referenced in the section B of the CRG instructions document. So building capacity projects we're defining as projects that seek to increase neighborhood, grassroots, or community capacity of applicants and their partners to increase resilience by building networks, increasing knowledge, and or improving access to resources such as funding. So at the end of a building capacity project, the applicant and partner should be better positioned to engage in sustained work to increase community and or habitat resilience. The instructions include some examples of what some of these projects could look like to help with brainstorming. Planning projects, uh, we're defining these as projects that seek to develop plans, assessments, regulations, or other strategic information that will guide community and or habitat resilience. So a planning project should result in a collaboratively developed planning product that will be used strategically to advance community and or habitat resilience beyond the life of this CRG project. Again, there are some examples of what we mean by those in the instructions document. And then finally, design projects we're defining as projects that seek to advance designs for site-specific physical resources or assets that will increase community and or habitat resilience. A design project should result in a collaboratively developed design product that can be considered for funding opportunities that support final design, permitting, and construction. A couple keynotes on design projects. This CRG funding cannot be used to design new hardened shoreline structures like riprap, seawalls, or revetments, but it can be used to design nature-based shoreline stabilization projects like living shorelines. And happy to provide a little more guidance on kind of the boundary or definition, but difference between those two shoreline stabilization approaches. Design projects CRG funding can be used to complete up to 75% of engineering designs, but can't support final engineering designs or permitting costs. So that's where the project needs to end. All right, a couple notes on funding. So we anticipate having about $200,000 totaled this year for funding. Minimum grant amounts you can request is $10,000, and the maximum amount you can request is $70,000. And all CRG funding, just a note here that it's all federal funding provided by NOAA in partnership with the Coastal Program. Federal grant funds and match can't be used again for final engineering designs, permitting, or construction costs. And there are some other limitations on how the federal funds can be used, including that we can't purchase equipment that exceeds a cost of $5,000. So just something to keep in mind. All right, so getting to the match commitment, typically we have requested or required in the past a match commitment on these grants. Match consists of the portion of the project costs or value that's not paid with the federal grant funds, and that can be any combination of cash or in-kind goods or services that the project applicants or team is bringing to the project. In this year, we're requesting a 4-to-1 federal grant funds to non-federal match through cash or in-kind services, but that's not required. So to give you an example here, in a 4-to-1 match commitment, a project might ask for $40,000 of CRG funds. That's the federal funding. And that project team would provide 10,000 additional dollars or value in non-federal match commitment. So the total project budget in that case would be $50,000, and that $10,000 of match can be provided as cash from some other source or volunteer time or other in-kind services from the team. That said, applicants can include a justification in their application for a reduced match commitment or no match commitment in cases where that reduced or lack of match commitment will eliminate barriers to applying for CRG funding. So please don't let the match requested amount deter you from applying, because we are able to offer some waiver in the event that that lack of match is justifiable. All right, so the project duration that we're asking folks to apply for is between 12 and 18 months. We would anticipate, based on our timeline, that projects would start between November 2023 and January 2024, and that just the variation there, or the range there, is just anticipating some projects may be a little more complicated in scoping and contracting. So they may start just a little bit later. Note that in the event that a project doesn't start by January 2024, we're reserving the right to forfeit the grant funds, and that is because we required to spend the funding by a certain amount of time. If the project hasn't come together by January 2024, we'll have to apply those funds to other efforts. The project end date we would anticipate is sometime between December of 2024 and June 30th of 2025. So 12 to 18 month kind of range for projects there. Here's some important dates. These are also shown in section F of the application instructions. And I'll run through them just really briefly here. So Friday, April 28th at 4 p.m., we're requesting that folks submit any questions to me, either by email or by phone. We can have a conversation if you can reach me. I'm happy to chat about project ideas or answer questions about application development, whatever it may be. We will be summarizing those discussions or responses via email to questions in a document that we'll post on the CRG website on Friday, May 5th, or by Friday, May 5th. And the purpose of that is just to be transparent with other folks who are interested in submitting applications, in case they can benefit from our responses to other potential applicants. Applications are due Friday, May 26th at 4 p.m. They're due via the application form that we're providing. I'll walk us through that in just a moment. And then we anticipate providing award notifications by Friday, June 16th. Then through the next month and a half or so, we'll work with the folks who have been awarded funding to finalize their project scopes and move them through contracting in the late summer and early fall, at which point we would anticipate the project to start by January of 2024, as I mentioned, and end by the end of June of 2025. Okay, now I'm going to take us through some visuals that help folks understand how to submit an application using the form that we provide via the website. So you'll complete an application using this web-based CRG form. You can, and then in addition to that, as you're developing the application, it's important to refer to the application instructions document that's available at the second link provided on this slide. The CRG web page looks like this. Um, and those three yellow arrows on this slide mark some of the important resources that I've mentioned already. So the first link is to the application form under that how to apply box. On the bottom right is where we'll post the recording of this webinar once it's completed. And on the bottom left, where you see that yellow arrow, you can find the instructions document. We'll also post the responses to questions here on this web page too. If you scroll down a little bit more on this website, you'll find the descriptions of past CRG projects and other resources that might provide some valuable context. When I click the application form link, I get taken to the form page here. So you have to have a State of New Hampshire form user account to complete the CRG application form. If you've never created an account in the State of New Hampshire forms application before, you select register in the top right here. If you already have an account, then you select sign in and you enter your credentials there. And this is what the web page looks like using Microsoft Edge as a browser. It might look a little different in Chrome or another browser. If I click register, I'll be prompted to create a user profile so that I can log in, save my work, and submit my application. And then back on the CRG form landing page, be sure to read all the text here. The arrow on the top right is pointing to frequently asked questions that will help you with your account. And also there's one there that helps explain how to forward your work with other partner collaborators if they also have accounts. So you can do some collaborative proposal development in that way. And then the arrow on the left indicates another place where you can access the application instructions document. So be sure not to miss that. That document looks like this. Um, if it were me developing a proposal, I'd have this open as a separate tab to reference as you go. Back on the form page again, when you click begin form entry down here where the yellow arrow is pointing, that takes you to a page that looks like this, and the form is broken into 5 sections, followed by a review step and a certify and submit step. Those are all along the left here. Your work will save as you go in this form. When you hover over the little eye that appears in the top right corner of each of the fields where you're entering details, you'll see some pop-up text shown here. Sometimes it's offering some instructions, other times it's just telling you the character limit. Be sure to stick to the character limits. Work does get cut off if you go over. So I'll take the last few minutes here to provide a little more detail about the application sections and how we'll be evaluating responses. So the application evaluation process and criteria are also laid out in that instruction document. You can find a rubric there. Um, the eligible applications that get submitted to us get reviewed by a CRG review team, which is composed of New Hampshire Coastal Program staff and some additional partner reviewers. I'll walk you through the rubric here just to ensure we all take a look at it. So section 1 is just the lead applicant information. It's pretty straightforward. There are 3 possible points that you can obtain here. Those points are awarded if the lead applicant has never before been awarded a CRG. So they won't be available to everyone. Really the purpose here is to incentivize new partners coming to the table. Section 2 is a project summary. So this project summary, you can obtain up to 6 points here. You'll also be filling in some simple sections like project title and your project category. Your location is awarded 1 point for adhering to the required location of the CRG program. Your project goal is worth 3 points. We'll evaluate kind of how clear and aligned the goal is with the purpose of the CRG funding opportunity. Project summary is provided here just to give us a real quick idea of what the project entails. And then you'll also provide your total project cost here. Getting into the meat of your application, section 3 is worth up to 40 points. This focuses on your project purpose and your audience. So in the purpose section, this is where you'll provide the justification for how the project addresses an issue, interest, or need related to coastal resilience, who the project is intended to serve, and why the CRG funds are important for supporting this particular project. Um, I'd emphasize also that in this section, we're looking for an explanation of past efforts or events that the project is building on, as well as a description of how the project outcomes will be useful or used beyond the end of the CRG award. In the environmental context section, also worth 10 points. This is where you talk about the importance of the environmental context within the project, how that context is expected to change or is perhaps threatened with climate change, um, explanation for how the project achieves some of the priorities or preferences mentioned earlier in this presentation around building coalitions or sustaining cultural heritage, et cetera, and then explaining how the project avoids or minimizes negative impacts to environmental and cultural resources. The next section, community engagement, also worth 10 points, is where you'll explain the description of the audiences, groups, or people engaged throughout the project and how, going back to that kind of preference for engaged uh, work with folks in your project that I discussed earlier. And then the fourth section here is advancement of diversity, equity, inclusion, justice, and accessibility, where we ask applicants to explain thoughtfully how the project will play a role in advancing DEIJA and specifically within the New Hampshire coastal zone communities. Section 4 is where we'd like to see some discussion of your project team, your work plan, and your budget. So this section's worth 41 points. The team, you'll receive more points for a team that's composed of diverse partners, and sort of a demonstration of the importance of different skill sets to complete your project. Reviewers will look at the lead applicant's ability to partner, um, and will also kind of understand that a smaller grant request limits the ability to partner extensively, and will factor that into the points awarded in this section. The work plan's worth 20 points. Um, and here we're looking for a thoughtful, realistic, and collaborative work plan. The application form has a format that requires you to input your work plan in the form of and deliverables and timeframes. So you'll see that once you get into the application form. We're looking for a thorough kind of emphasis and focus on this work plan. The next section, budget by activity, worth up to 5 points, will take the activities as defined within your work plan and assign budget amounts to each of those. And then we'll look within the project deliverable section for deliverables that align with the goal and the proposed work plan, and that also applicants that clearly describe how the deliverables are intended to be used, again, beyond the CRG project itself, will receive more points in this section. Finally, there's 1 point awarded for reference or completion of the non-federal match section. We will not be awarding this point to folks. Applicants will receive this point regardless of whether they're meeting the requested match or not, so long as in the event that they're not meeting the requested match, they provide a solid justification for why. finally, in section 5, this is where we're looking for supporting documents. A map and up to 2 photos can be provided to supplement your application. These are optional. You don't have to provide them, but there are some points provided for submitting them, so they're encouraged. And then letters of commitment are required for any partners that are funded or are providing match or playing some contributing role on the project. The lead applicant does not need to submit a letter of commitment. That's by nature of submitting the application form. We'll take that as your commitment to the project. And then finally, letters of support from audiences, groups, or people engaged in the project or who may benefit from the project can also be provided, and those are optional. Okay, that's all I have to share today. I'd be happy to take any questions from you all about what I've covered already or project concept ideas. And I'll hand it over to Polly to maybe summarize if anything came up in the chat while I was presenting. Thanks for listening.
Nothing to report from the chat world. Quiet group.
All right. Feel free to input questions in the chat if you have them at this point. You're also welcome to come off mute and ask your question that way if you prefer.
This is Bill Howley. The design of the application is very succinct. I appreciate that very much, and I appreciate your presentation.
Thank you, Bill. Appreciate it. We're trying to make it easier for folks than it may have been in the past, so hopefully we're achieving that. I'm happy to, if anyone has a project concept they want to run by this group or run by me, we're happy to discuss that now. Any other questions, certainly welcome. Okay, Tracy.
Oh, okay. Hey.
Yeah,
got it.
Yep. Thanks, Polly.
Yeah.
I see Tracy asking, are there any major changes from the 2021 application? The 2021 application was also submitted via the online form. That's pretty much the same. One change we did make was to expand the character limits so that you have a little more space to describe your team and the details of your project. I'd say that's kind of a minor change. Generally the CRG opportunity this time around is pretty similar. We've changed some language to emphasize some preferences that were maybe a little less clear last time around. For example, really emphasizing that we want inclusive engagement and thought given to that. Emphasizing that community resilience can include really just the very grassroots kind of level work to get a group kind of mobilized around kind of a broader definition of community resilience. Those are a couple of the bigger changes that I can think of, but generally speaking, it's pretty similar to 2021. I see a couple others typing questions, so we'll give them a second. Abigail, go ahead.
Thanks, Kirsten. Thanks for a great presentation. I have a question about the advancement of diversity, equity, justice, inclusion, and accessibility, and whether that relates to populations within the New Hampshire coastal zone communities or if that can be broader, but related to resources within the coastal zone communities?
Yeah, it can be both. Um, so there's a section in the application instructions that may be helpful for answering this section, where I'll actually go back to the slide that I'm thinking of here. Bear with me. Where we discuss, oh, oh, sorry about that. All right, where we discuss the preferences for project types. So in section B of the instructions, we discuss that preferences given to projects that build coalitions and collaboratively developed products. So both of those bullets are kind of helpful to reference. And in particular, when we talk about collaboratively developing products and outcomes, we're looking for projects that integrate inclusive, ethical, and mutually beneficial engagement in decision-making structures. And in particular, we talk about centering priorities of groups that have historically been excluded from municipal government and other decision-making spaces, including communities with low incomes, Black communities, Indigenous communities, communities of color, speakers of languages other than English, and people with disabilities, not limited to those groups. So a project that will more actively, I think, be integrating and advancing DEIJA in its project would do a really good job of this piece and be able to speak to that really specifically in their project activities. Um, Projects that do that well are going to be preferred. But in addition to that, I think projects that build coalitions, protect and sustain cultural heritage, advance environmental justice, advance inclusive access to the coast, and/or protect and restore natural coastal resources, all of those preferences kind of speak to your second point there, Abigail, or part of your question. If the project is achieving some of those preferences, I think you can speak to kind of the broader benefits and advancement of DEIJ principles because the project is aiming to, say, improve access to a coastal resource, improve recreation in one area, access to recreation in one particular area for folks who maybe haven't been able to access that historically speaking, as easily as others. So both of those are relevant descriptions and within that section focused on DEIJ. Hopefully that answers your question. Okay, and I saw, let's see, another question from Autumn. Autumn has a raggedy idea to discuss if there's time before the call ends.
Yeah, I'm
I think
happy to
there's
let
time now.
anyone else go if they have questions before I start rattling off my thoughts.
I'm happy to chat about it now while we're recording, Autumn, or if you want to chat about it after, but it's up to you.
Yeah, I think I'd rather chat while we're not recording if that's okay.
Yep, totally fine.
Thanks.
All right, I'm not seeing any other questions from folks. We'll give it one more minute. Appreciate, again, all of you coming to listen in. And as mentioned, the recording will be on the website. Feel free to reach out between now and the end of April with questions if you want to have more of a discussion. And we're really hoping to see some great project applications from the folks on the call and other partners. Feel free to also share the info provided to other partners, other folks throughout your network too. All right. Thanks, everybody. Okay.